Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. Today we're going to do a review of a game that just arrived from GMT Games, done by Harold Buchanan, who some may know from his coin entry Liberty or Death. This is called Flashpoint South China Sea. It is the first volume in what we hope to be a long-running series of Flashpoint games. In it, you are either the United States or China competing over the contested islands in the South China Sea. It's a shorter span game, shorter time frame, not quite maybe as short as the Lunchbox series, Fort Sumter, Red Flag over Paris, but still something to be played with a lot of meat in a short amount of time. Does it achieve that lofty goal? Let's find out. Okay, let's take a look at what comes inside Flashpoint South China Sea, a game designed by Harold Buchanan with graphics by Terry Leeds. Alright, you get this nice, very larger sized board. Not too large, not too small, just right, Goldilocks. And on this board, you're going to see different areas of contention. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nations. You've got 3 different regions of the South China Sea that's being bartered and manipulated over. You've got the People's Republic of China with its area where it keeps its available and reserve. Uh, they call those CRs. They're cubes. They're the Chinese cubes. And then we have the American cubes. Those are phonops. Phonops. Phenoptitude. Alright, you've got the, again, same thing, available, political, blah, blah, blah. And you're going to be contending over this area using this deck of event cards. Now, the event cards are multifaceted. 4 sides to every card, 4 purposes to every card in this game too, so very interesting. But yeah, we'll get into those later, but you have a deck of cards. There's neutral, there's Chinese, and there's American events that occur. You also get, every player is going to get, well, nothing. I'm kidding. They're going to get a hand of 6 cards, which we'll go into as well to start the game. But the other thing is there are scoring cards, and this is very important. Now, the rules say to lay out the scoring cards this way, but I'm laying them out this way for a reason. But the scoring cards are what gives you the actual points as you go back and forth on the point scoring track here. Alright, you also get lots of handy sheets, a sequence of actions. That's handy. On the other side, you get a list of the operations cost for the various actions you can do if you use a card for its op points rather than its event or other things. And then you get standard, awesome, well-designed rule books. The rules of play are very easy, not much difficulty that, and again, it reinforces the same information you have on the player aids. You've got a specific 2-player version, and you've got specific solo rules of play, and so if you don't need to I love this. You don't need to refer back and forth. This is all you need to know to play the solo game, and this is all you need to know to play the 2-player game. Thank you. You also get a playbook, which surprisingly doesn't have an example of play, but it does have a lot of information. It tells you a bit about the game, how it came to be, every card, what it represents, and why it's the way it is today. You've got, and this is the strategy tips, and then some really good information on kind of how we got to where we are in the state of the world today. And of course, we have the solo play aid as well if you're playing the solo. And apparently, if you buy the deluxe edition, you get a plastic spoon. Anyway, that's it for what comes in Flashpoint South China Sea. Now let's take a look at how you play the game. Okay, let's go over how to play Flashpoint South China Sea. Now, before we begin, there's a setup. There is one thing to note, and that is, how do you win the game? Well, this victory point track, a slight homage to Twilight Struggle, goes back and forth, and many other games that do this too. And so whoever at the end of 3 campaign rounds has the most victory points will win. At 0, I believe China wins, and if anybody ever is doing so well that they get up to here, it's a victory instantly for either side if they manage to score that many points during play. At the start, yeah, that's basically the essence of it. And how you get victory points is always through these scorecards. Now, the manual suggests that you lay them out on the side and shows in a row, which works great once you know all the cards and stuff. For teaching purposes, I actually found it easier to put the scoring cards next to the countries or the context by which you'll score. It just helps people keep in mind that there's a reason for all their actions, and that is to eventually get to an optimal place to execute these scorecards, because however they score is going to be based on the game state. So if you choose to score Malaysia, but your opponent has a better situation in Malaysia, you're giving them points. Don't do that. Anyway, so all of these regions, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, and Philippines, all have their own scoring cards. There's also two more general scoring cards, which are the how well you're doing in contending for these areas in the South China Sea, and then an economics card, which goes over the entire region, and you score points based on how well you've done in influencing the economic status. Everyone starts with 4 cubes, which they can lay out on the board. Nobody starts with any diplomatic influence. That's on you. So I'm going to go ahead and say put here, and you will usually want to put this based on what your cards are, because you're going to have a plan. I don't have a plan. I'm just throwing this together to explain. Economic, and economic. Look at that. Aren't we frisky? All right. So there you go. Every player gets 6 cards. And this is the interesting thing. As you start the game, in order to decide who is going to be what role, everybody takes their influence cubes and they secretly bid a certain amount. For example, if I'm going to be, you know what, I really want to be China. They have an advantage during play slightly, but you have to actually bid your cubes to say, I want to be China. So say, for example, I bid 3 cubes and my opponent bids 2 cubes. Well, I get to be China, but they get all of those cubes that I bid. They get them in victory points to start with. So it kind of evens it out. It's sort of an I bid, you choose. Very, very interesting. Not really. But anyway, so let's get rolling. Now, the side with the fewest VP points, which is currently China, gets to go first. And they're going to decide whether they want to execute a card first or whether they want the Americans to. We're going to go ahead and execute a card because we're going to show you how it's done. And I'm not playing this game for skill. I'm playing this for demonstrative purposes. That's how I play every single game I ever play, so that I can at least not go home holding my head in shame too much. Alright, so we're going to play this for the event. We can play it for the ops points. We can play it for the event. We can play it to score, which wouldn't do us too much good right now because things are pretty even keel, and we wouldn't get much out of it. Or we can play it for the mode. We can't do that for the a la mode, but that'll come into play later. Let's play it for the let's play it for the event, even though you fulfill it as best as you can. Move all U.S. players to available, or political warfare tokens to available. Now, what does that mean? We're going to set that aside and explain to you what you can use the ops points for. The event's obvious. The ops points you can go over with a handy sheet. Economic scoring we'll go over later, and as well as mode. When you want to use your card for operations costs, these are the things you can do. You can place influence in economic or diplomatic tracks on any of the 5 nations. You can move a cube from reserve to available. If you get low on cubes, you may want to do that. You can place a phenop, and so you can increase your phenoptitude. And that means the Americans are going to want to do that. The Chinese can't. And you're going to place it's freedom of navigation ops into one of these areas of the South China Sea. That will increase tension, which we'll also go over shortly. Or you can place, if you're the Chinese, you can do the same thing and place one of your CR tokens. You can also place a political warfare. This is a track that builds up until you take a risk to try to execute that. We'll go over that as well. So first off, let's do this. We're going to execute this for the event. Move all political warfare. They don't have it. And then place 3 Chinese political warfare. Okay. So it's going to place all Chinese political warfare. Silly move? Let's find out. And that's it. That's the end of that card play. Now it's the American side to decide what they want to do to counteract that. Now they have other options too. They're going to use... Wow, they can do... we're going to play this card because I'm going to show you an example. It doesn't belong to us, so we can't use the event. We could score, but right now, Brunei, there wouldn't be much score. There's nothing to, it wouldn't be in our advantage to do that. So we are instead going to use the ops points. We're going to place that there and use 2 ops points. Now, the first thing we're going to do is place a phenop, and that increases tension. What does the tension do? It makes it harder for the Chinese. It requires more ops points for the Chinese to match us in increasing their presence through CRs in the South China Sea. So we've done some good there. And then let's say we have these scoring opportunities in Malaysia. So let's go ahead. Yeah, we're behind in Malaysia. So ooh, yes, let's do that. Okay, so there we go. So we played that card, and we are righteously moving along. Now we swing back to the Chinese. Now the Chinese have an opportunity here. They have a card here. It's not theirs, so they wouldn't get to use the event. They're not really concerned right now about scoring Vietnam, because that would benefit the Americans, as you can see, because they have more influence right now. But they have this icon, this mode, and that matches that mode. That means that they can use this a la mode to match that to do one of two things. They can either score Brunei, do the scoring, or they can use the event, and they're going to do that. So they're basically co-opting this event here by using this card to execute that event. Place 3 Chinese diplomatic influence. Now, unfortunately, I'm using it all in political warfare. But here we can do Vietnam, narrow the gap. Anyway, all right. So then the Chinese are finished. Now it's on to us, and then we're going to let's use this. So we're going to, no, we're not going to score Malaysia. We're going to score, do we have anything to score the Philippines? Nope. All right. So instead, let's use this for scoring. We're not going to use the event card. We're going to hope that they don't have something to match it and be able to use that mode again. But we can use it for 3 ops, or we can use it for scoring. In this case, I'm going to it's silly. I probably use the points in real life, but for scoring, we go over here to this card and we say, compare the CRs and the FNOPs. The side with the positive differential scores it as VPs up to 4. So what that means is that we're comparing our FNOPs, we have 1, to theirs 0. So we're going to get a victory point. Yes, we are. Look at that. Isn't that cool? And then we turn that over. We can only score that once every campaign. And so we're looking, yeah, so now we have 6 objectives for people to go with. All right, so we're done with that. We've shown you how to score with the cards. We've shown you how to use ops with the cards, how to use events, and how to use modes. So we're really showing you what there is to do. Let's talk about the tension track. The tension track makes it very interesting in that some of the cards, as you're doing actions like placing things in this sea, let's just show as an example here, as you're placing influence here, based on the track, determines how many ops points. So I could not, for example, if I had one, I'd have to use a 2-op card rather than a 1-op card to place a single influence here. And so that what's happened. Once you get to critical, you immediately have to move one of your units. If you're the one that triggered it, then you have to move an available to reserve, which means it takes more time to get it back out. And you can't place anything in here, nor can you resolve political warfare. So let's say, but there are cards that let you flip that tension down to any level, usually neutral ones. Look at that, President of the Philippines. So that if you use it, we'll go, you know what, we're back to low. Let's all just get along. Thank you, President Duarte. Kidding. Duterte. A little bit of the expanse there. So that's what the tension track does. It's a limiter and it's an inhibitor. Let's go over the political warfare. When you have political warfare cubes, you can use for a 0-op, it doesn't even cost you an ops points, you can flip a card, and if that card is equal to or less than the amount of political warfare cubes you placed, you have successfully engaged in political warfare. What does that let you do? It lets you move all these back to available. Yay! And you can lock a region. Locking a region effectively blocks your opponent from being able to use operations points to be able to increase economic and diplomatic presence. You can still use events. There's still a way to kind of shift that in and mess with it. But in general, you kind of have a monopoly there on being able to increase economic and diplomatic influence, which could be handy if, say, one of your cards for where you locked it happens to be a place that you have a scorecard for, like, say, Indonesia. And like, oh, I want to lock that, and then I want to, that kind of helps you out to kind of more surely be able to play a scoring card for Indonesia and maybe pump up some points and get yourself, if you're China, back here. on the high road. And that's it. That's the game. You're gonna play all the cards in your hand, all 6 cards. When that's done, you're gonna flip the scorecards over, modify the campaign marker, grab 6 more cards, play through it. You're gonna do it again, 3 times, and then final scoring happens, and then wherever the victory point track lands is going to be who is the winner. If it's 0 or less, it's China. 0 or this way, it's China. If it's 1 or more, then the Americans win. That's the game of Flashpoint South China Sea. Now let's get into my final thoughts. All right, final thoughts on Flashpoint South China Sea. As always, we go over the cons first, then we go over the pros, then we go over my final thoughts. So let's start with the cons, and had to do some reaching to find some things I didn't like about the game, to be honest with you. So a lot of these are going to be nitpicky. There are lots of examples of play in the rulebook. It's not a large rule book. It doesn't take long to learn it. I do miss that one longer play example that a lot of the playbooks have, where like, hey, let's just go over the first X turns or whatever. But totally can live without it, given the situation where it's just not that hefty of a game, so it's not that bad. The tension track I found was intriguing. It's kind of, like I said, it's a nod to Twilight Struggle a little bit with its DEFCON track. I can't help but feel like the middle ground on it isn't as impacting. I felt like in all the games we were playing that generally you want to either peg it high or close to high or low. Further plays may flesh that out, though, and there will be further plays. There's also the issue where I've seen, as far as very knowledgeable expert players playing at a high level, there's been some balance concern regarding the gimme points that the U.S. gets right off the bat, or the China versus U.S. and the intrinsic advantage. There's been some discussion on that. But honestly, as a career novice at pretty much every game I play, that kind of fine-tuned high-level discussion is way above my play grade. So I just having fun. That's that. And the other thing is, and this is going to be really just a personal thing, I really kind of have been taking on I've been replacing cubes lately. We have these great art, these great cards, we've got these great things, and then you just get these, like, wooden cubes, like, yay. So for Plains Indian Wars, for example, I swapped them out for higher quality meeples. In this game, I actually grabbed one of my copies of Twilight Struggle and took the influence tokens for that, and yes, I know, it's Russia, not China, but it's still red. And I used those instead, which I think gave it a little bit more of a pizzazz level for me. It's just a personal thing. That's all. That's really all I got to say that's even remotely negative about this game. So let's get into the pros. Here's my favorite part. Great price point. This is not an expensive game by GMT standards, and yet you get a lot going on. It's a low component but a high impact game where you've got this similar to like Absolute War or some other games, maybe even Caesar, Rome versus Gaul, where like you don't have a ton of components, you don't have the 800 counters that Fields of Fire has, but you still have a really high impact game. It's not simplified down to a useless degree or a tepid degree. The game board is a nice middle ground size between the compact Fort Sumter style, Red Flag over Paris, and of course the full blown size of the maps. And the art is, of course, stellar. It always is. They just seem to pump out just the right vibe, the right feel for the game, the right space, lots of spacing to put things, clear areas where to have all your components. They just rock at that. And thank you, whoever decided to make 2 independent rulebooks for solo versus 2-player. It simplifies things so much when you have this all-inclusive vacation for solo or an all-inclusive vacation for 2-player, and you don't have to do some of the things you normally have to do, like cross-checking, okay, there's some of that, but there's some of that, like no oscillating between the rulebook sections where, hey, here's the rule, oh, but if you're playing solo, you don't have that. You don't have any of the, like, doing, undoing, and redoing of setup or play steps, like set this up if you're playing solo, now go over here and change what you just set up. None of that goes on. It's like, this is the rulebook. Everything I need to know is here. Really like that approach. I know that probably wouldn't work for games with larger rule sets, but in this case it worked great. Thank you. Love the 4D nature of the card play. We've all seen, card-driven games where you've got the ops or the event. Woohoo! We've all done that. And I love that the events aren't just flavor text
masking what are really just ops anyway. It's just not. It's yeah. Here, I feel that the event text really matches with plausible game impacts for what the events actually do beyond just the ops points that you can spend. Score beyond the ops that you can spend. And beyond the events, you also have the scoring. It is intrinsically built into the cards that you're playing, and I really like that. You're not like, okay, I've got the scorecard, I play it. It's more like the scorecards are there. It's up to you to decide and negotiate and posture and position for how you're going to play it for maximum effect, hoping that your opponent doesn't beat you to it. That's really cool. That just makes every card as a scorecard trigger. I really like that. The mode is probably the murkiest to describe to people, but it makes sense. There've been games before that are like, hey, if you play an event that's not yours, I have a chance to play it, and mess with you and oh darn it, I wish you hadn't played that. I like that. I like that it's a refinement of other games that let you do that sort of thing, and it's always in the back of your mind as you're playing cards. There's always that tiny hidden risk reward measure for playing the card versus giving away a potential big advantage to opponent if the cards align just right. It does have an impact on how and when you play your cards. And again, it's just I really like the approach, and I have historically of using cards for different purposes or purposi or purpi or anyway, where you've got it's been done before. Combat Commander Europe had that. Fields of Fire has 42 special herbs and spice things on the cards. Tank Duel has that kind of thing going on as well. I really like that. The other thing that really has an impact on me as far as enjoying the game is the asymmetry right from the get-go. Controversy aside with whatever, I like the bidding. I really do, actually. I like the fact that whoever is, I think it's instead of like, okay, whoever wore the reddish shirt gets to be China and gets the start. No, it's really cool that there's an impact to who goes first, and you are making a conscious choice on how much you're going to bid. Like, if you really want to be China, how much of a head start do you want to give the U.S. to do so, knowing the intrinsic advantage versus the gimme kind of thing, the handicap you give someone. It's name that tune, but with missiles, and I really think that's first off, it tells you that there's asymmetry there because you're doing this. You're going, like, if I'm giving you points, it must be because something's cooler. It must be because I got some benefit here, and that's actually really helpful for starting players, in my find. Um, One of the things that games that distill down complex matters, as opposed to coin games or full simulations of next war kind of level stuff, is that when you abstract and distill things, you can wind up becoming samey, or with the sameness factor or the stripping away factor. The same thing here. We don't need to deal with that because you have distinct motivations, distinct benefits and advantages or drawbacks. The rules of engagement are slightly different. With the U.S. going, hey, like I can push your buttons in the contested areas, but you have to exhaust more ops points to kind of keep up. But then you get to keep your stuff. Yeah, you have this distinctiveness to the two sides that enriches the experience for either side you're playing on. There's when it comes to stripping away of the games, there are certain ones that really, really do that, like Fort Sumter, Red Flag over Paris, but less to a degree. I actually enjoyed that it didn't do that. Blitzkrieg, Caesar in 20 Minutes, Twilight Struggle, all perfectly good games in their own right, but they do have a way of stripping away things. They have to in order to distill it down to a short session experience. This is probably the least stripped away game in that gaming class that I've seen. I don't feel robbed in any way of a lot of the tension. Again, it's not going to be Imperial Struggle. It's not going to be Fields of Fire. If you're looking for that, those are the games. But this is an approachable, easy way to get into a complex situation and feel like you're having an intense match. The playbook. I always love the playbooks. I'm glad that even in little games like this, you have your playbook that gives you the history, it gives you strategy tips, it gives you a timeline for how we got to the real world situation that we're in now. And the coolest part is, even I haven't seen GMT do this before, but they have actual scan codes where, based on what tension level, you can play music that's mood setting. I love this. This is for me. Thanks for doing it. It seems like such a small little trivial, yeah, whatever, haha, but I love it because a big thing for me in games is immersion, more than competition. Yeah, both matter. Yeah, you want to win. I want to be competitive. I don't need to master it to the point where I get real frowny and nitpicky. But I do want to compete, but I also love the immersion factor. I'm in it for the immersion. And of course, anything that's like, hey, read this book, check out this article that sets the stage, listen to this music is like, that's a huge plus to me. Like, thank you, whoever came up with that. Please do that again. Please come up with a GMT playlist. I will play it forever. And finally, the solo play. Again, because, I mean, obviously it has its own rule book, so it's obviously fleshed out. It's not tacked on in any way. It's a smart, a reasonably low overhead competitor, and it plays both sides just fine, and it stands in solidly when other fleshwalkers aren't around. It does the job. And reading the notes, it confirms that you should never throw away a napkin with design notes, no matter how many years have passed. So, anyway, so the biggest thing about it when you get into the core playing is that it really shows a refinement to the experience. A lot of refinement clearly has been done to this, and it packs a lot into what is effectively 6 choices per, or 18 choices per player. There's tension is the name of the game, and tension it succeeds at. You'll feel like you're fighting all over, despite not having an overt, war unit or war action. There's a splendid trade-off of a splendid blend of trade-offs, risk and reward, and opportunism going on here as you're playing. You got the U.S. pushing the tension higher. You've got China trying to counter that. You're playing cards with timing and hoping they don't backfire, but hoping you can maximize a scoring opportunity when it presents itself. You've got that political war costs in the cost-risk analysis, like put 1 point into it and hope you get a 1. That's a real savings. Take that. Yeah, who doesn't love a deal? The other thing is the economic versus the diplomatic tracks. I like that because one is more beneficial over time if if the silver dollars align. The other has a slightly more permanent fixing of influence for other ways of scoring. The big star is the contested islands, and that shows well too. Their reach and the impact of ignoring them is mighty. And especially with China staying put over the course of the game whenever it places, and the U.S. has to climb that hill every campaign of the 3 campaigns. I mean, the game might look like a Mini Cooper, but there's a Maserati engine in there when you hit the gas, so that's good. So in summary, I've seen, and again, this isn't a lunchtime game series. I'm comparing them mostly because of the similarities of the scope, playtime, and kind of how they play out. But I've seen the lunchtime series games evolve from Fort Sumter, which was okay, but did not necessarily whet my appetite. Red Flag over Paris added a shadow of similar things here to this that really invigorated the short gaming space to a great degree, enough to make it palatable to bring to the table quite often, actually. And that series continues to evolve. I get more excited for hearing about some of the new things coming out with it. Flashpoint is listed as the first of its series, and even out of the gates, it's got surprisingly meaty, nuanced play, despite the simplified initial impressions that you may have. I played it probably 20 times already. It's a mix of solo and 2-player, and I still find it's got this edge of seat intensity, particularly when everyone is kind of becoming more and more aware of ways to exercise and maximize and leverage the benefits of their particular side. So anyone who's followed this channel knows I play a lot of GMT games. I buy almost all of them these days, and so my collection has grown. But there are 3 that over the past year or so have been kind of watershed games, the giddy games, the ones that I'm really excited to get. Not that I'm not excited about the other ones, that's okay, guys, it's fine. But there are 3 that were really intensely interesting to me. One was Imperial Struggle, which like just blew me away, as I had hoped it would. Again, no game as Twilight Struggle is still the greatest game ever made. Nothing's topped it. It's been years. I still have never been dislodged from that belief. But Imperial Struggle was very much what I wanted. The other one was Mr. President, which we haven't seen out yet, although the playthroughs look really intensely exciting. Like this one's like must have. I'll buy 2 copies if it gets it here faster, kind of thing. And the third one was this game, Flashpoint South China Sea, because I was really holding high hopes, and it met my expectations and met my hopes. I expect it to grow. I expect to continue to have it grow in interest as I bring it to the gaming sessions and such. It's exactly what it intends to be, and it does it really well. So Flashpoint South China Sea. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.